James Wan is back with a new original horror film, so let's talk about it. Over the last 20 years, James Wan has clearly established himself as a top-tier horror director, but he's also had massive mainstream success with Furious 7 as well as Aquaman. So when he decided to follow up Aquaman, a billion-dollar film, by directing an original horror story, I was immediately interested as to what this film was and what he'd be able to do with his new clout in Hollywood. Finally, I've been able to see the film. I'll let you know what I thought in just a second, but first, join me down below in the comment section. Let me know, what did you think about Malignant? Was it awesome? Was it awful? Was it somewhere in between? And is this a movie with a lot to discuss? If you want to go into spoilers, just put a spoiler warning up in your comment before you start talking about the specifics, and let's get started talking about the movie. And for this movie, I'm gonna break from my usual good, mixed, bad structure because the entire movie pulled out so many mixed emotions of excitement and confusion, and I'm not quite sure how I felt about this. And that's one of the reasons it's taken me several days to post a review, because I went to go see it in the theater on Friday, and I've just been processing through it over the entire weekend, preparing what I'm going to say, and I'm still not entirely sure what I'm going to say. And right off the bat, this is one wild, bonkers horror film that just throws everything at the audience, and that's kind of what makes it so fascinating. In the last decade, James Wan has directed 2 separate billion-dollar films. He's responsible for launching the Conjuring franchise, which itself is this billion-dollar franchise, and he's at a point in time where he has a tremendous amount of clout and decided to do this niche little horror film that almost no one else would be able to propose, this insane, weird horror film with so many different subgenres thrown and mashed together with such a crazy twist in the third act as to where it's headed, and get this kind of budget and pull it off with such a slick production. Certainly, many weirder films have been made, and they were very commonplace like back in the 80s, but what you don't have is a billion-dollar director between his billion-dollar films pausing to make a movie like this that's so designed for horror genre fans that want the weirder the better, that don't mind if it gets campy, that don't mind if there's bonkers, weird things happening from beginning to end with the film. And so on the one hand, I absolutely love that this film exists. I love that James Wan leveraged his influence and sway in Hollywood to make the weird film that he wanted, rather than just continuing to make more and more mainstream films. With that said though, was it entirely to my taste? Probably not. Likewise, it felt like a film from a director who clearly liked a lot of weird, dark films growing up, has a fondness for original ideas that are offbeat, but then has spent the last decade doing sequels to his own films and generating billion-dollar mainstream products for big, gigantic studios, and he just had all of his weird, wacky, bonkers ideas squished inside of him, and he had to get them all out in one movie. That's what this felt like to me. This movie is just so jam-packed with subplots, creepy images, ideas, subgenres, and it tells a coherent story, but it feels a little bit like the movie's trying to get from A to D, and instead of going by route of B and C, it decides to stop by K and Q and F, and it just kind of goes all over the place when it's just trying to do this right here, because James Wan wanted to do so many different things, and he's been too busy swimming in with the fishes with Aquaman and driving fast cars and continuing the Conjuring franchise, and so he just crammed it all into this one movie. And it's fascinating to watch because it starts off with a pretty campy opening sequence, and then it goes pretty conventional with the plot line of the main lady for about 30 minutes, and then as it goes along, it just keeps adding on subgenres and new things and getting stranger and stranger as it goes along until it goes so wild in the third act in ways that the trailers didn't imply, that I wouldn't have imagined, as I watched the first hour and 15 minutes of the movie, and then it just goes for it and adds new genres, new influences, new ultra gore, ultra violence in a wild new ways not seen in any of the rest of the film. And it makes for just an unusual, unique experience watching the film. Based off the cinema score, which is a C, a whole bunch of people went to go see it and they went, what on earth did I just watch? I'm in a bunch of horror groups on Facebook and on Twitter, and the horror community seems in large part to be loving this movie, and that makes sense. James Wan, who is a horror guy at heart, but has the clout of a billion-dollar director, made a film for true horror fans with all the gore, all the subgenres that are incredibly niche, and very rarely has a director of this clout decided to go in this direction. And I'm pretty sure horror fans are going to love this gift that he's given them for some time. For me personally, as I mentioned before, it doesn't all entirely work for me. And I think a big part of that is, first off, as I said, there's just too many ideas, and so some of them don't get fleshed out as much, and some of them feel like distractions. Second, for as much as the movie can be campy, goofy, and the final twist is so over-the-top bananas, the movie takes itself very serious at times. And so it's this odd mix of campy plus overly serious, and I think the tone needed to be balanced a little bit more. Even the music is a mixed bag here. There's this phenomenal reworking of the Pixies' Where Is My Mind in this film that sometimes when it's used, it's amazing. Like, what a great piece of music that fits this weird film. And other times, these songs start playing that just don't fit the tone of the scene that we just saw. It doesn't hit the same emotional beat, and it's like a transition to the next song. And so it's just distracting as, once again, James Wan's just throwing in everything that he wants and that he loves, and it's just odd the way that it plays out. But then on the positive, James Wan always has a great visual flair, and you see that on display here, and you see him kind of going for everything that you might want to do, from the opening sequence that is almost Sam Raimi-esque to just these trippy, dreamlike images of how it shows what the woman in the lead character in the story is kind of experiencing in the story, to the color palette, to when big action starts happening in it. It's just done with a slickness where you can see everything that's taking place. I mean, he's just got a great eye for visuals. When all is said and done, there's a number of things about this movie that simply did not work for me, and there was just too much in there. But I am so glad that James Wan made this film at this point in time in his career, and that it exists. Real quick before I give you my final score on this one, be sure to join me down below in the comments section. This one is getting a polarized response from people. Some people are loving it, some people are hating it. Let's be respectful, and if you want to talk spoilers, just be sure to put a spoiler warning up. Also, coming tomorrow, I'm going to rank all of James Wan's films, so if you want to know what I thought about any specific one of them, come back tomorrow for that video. When I was sitting in the theater watching this film, it was so wildly different from what I was expecting that I didn't know what to think about it. And as I was driving home, all I wanted to do was talk with people about it, hear what they thought about it. I wanted to tell my wife the plot of the movie. I just couldn't get it out of my head because I was so fascinated by what James Wan had just created. And I think that's the most important thing. He made a movie that got in my head and someone else's and got me thinking. And that's what movies are supposed to do. Actually catch your attention and leave a mark. Not a total triumph for me, but a movie I'm glad exists. Overall, it's a B movie, so let's give it a B. On the entertainment scale, let's go 7 out of 10. And if you're a horror fan into weird movies, go see this movie in the theater, go support it. If you're a little bit more skeptical about things, you can probably just check it out on HBO Max. And if you don't like weird horror that gets wacky, probably not the right movie for you. Remember to come back tomorrow. I'm going to rank all of James Wan's films. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies too much.